The ocean keeps secrets better than any vault. In the summer of 1986, Malibu was paradise. Golden sand stretched for miles beneath a sky so blue it hurt to look at. The Pacific rolled in with perfect sets, and the beach was alive with the sound of laughter, radios, and the hiss of waves breaking on shore. But on August 14th, the ocean took something it never gave back. His name was Tyler Brennan. 18 years old, blonde hair bleached white by salt and sun, a local kid who lived for the water. Everyone knew him, the boy who paddled out before dawn and stayed until the light died. The one who could read the waves like a language only he understood. That Thursday morning, Tyler grabbed his board and walked down to the beach. He told his younger brother he'd be back by noon. He never came home. For 38 years, his disappearance haunted Malibu like a ghost story whispered around bonfires. No body, no answers. Just a yellow surfboard with blue stripes, found floating 2 miles offshore, and a family that never stopped searching. This is the story of what the ocean kept hidden, and how decades later, the truth finally surfaced. The morning Tyler disappeared, the beach was quiet. It was a Thursday, mid-August. Most of the summer tourists had already left. The locals had the coast to themselves again, the kind of morning surfers dream about. Clean swells, offshore wind, glassy water that reflected the sky like a mirror. Tyler woke up at 5:30. He always did. His room was small, cluttered with surf magazines, wax-stained towels, and posters of Tom Curran and Jerry Lopez. He pulled on his board shorts, grabbed a banana from the kitchen, and walked barefoot down the wooden steps that led from his family's house to the sand. His younger brother, Danny, was still asleep. Their mother was making coffee. She heard the screen door close. She didn't think anything of it. Tyler always went out early. It was routine, normal, safe. He paddled out just after 6. The sun was barely up. The water was cold even in August. He didn't wear a wetsuit. He never did. He said it slowed him down. He liked the feeling of the ocean against his skin, the shock of it, the way it woke him up. There were 2 other surfers out that morning, both locals. They saw Tyler. They waved. He waved back. They caught a few waves together, then drifted apart. That's how it works in the water. You share the lineup, but you're alone with the ocean. Around 7:30, one of the surfers paddled in. He had to get to work. The other stayed out a little longer, then left around 8. Tyler was still out there, sitting on his board, watching the horizon, waiting for the next set. That was the last time anyone saw him alive. By noon, Danny started to worry. Tyler had said he'd be back. He always kept his word. Danny walked down to the beach. He scanned the water. No sign of his brother. He asked a few people if they'd seen him. No one had. Not recently. By 2 in the afternoon, their mother called the lifeguard station. They sent a patrol boat out. They searched the coastline. They found nothing. By evening, the Coast Guard was involved. Helicopters circled overhead. Divers went down. Volunteers walked the beach with flashlights, calling his name into the wind. The next morning, a fisherman found Tyler's board. It was floating 2 miles south of where he'd gone in. The leash was still attached, but it had been torn. Not cut. Torn. Like something had ripped it apart. There was no blood, no damage to the board. Just that torn leash, frayed and twisted, and the empty ocean beyond. The investigation moved fast at first. Police interviewed everyone who'd been at the beach that day. They checked the tides, the currents, the weather patterns. They brought in marine biologists to assess the possibility of a shark attack. They found no evidence, no witnesses, no body. Theories spread like wildfire. Some said he'd drowned, got caught in a rip current and pulled under. Others whispered about foul play, a drug deal gone wrong, a fight, a jealous boyfriend. Malibu in the 80s had its dark side, cocaine, money, secrets hidden behind beach house gates. But there was no proof, no motive, no suspects, just a missing boy and a town that couldn't make sense of it. Tyler's parents put up flyers. They offered a reward. They appeared on local news stations, pleading for information. His mother's voice cracked every time she said his name. His father stood beside her, silent, his jaw tight, his eyes red. Weeks passed, then months. The search was called off. The case went cold. Life moved on. the way it always does. But the Brennan family never moved on. They kept Tyler's room exactly as he'd left it. His surfboard leash, the torn one, hung on the wall like a relic, a reminder of the question that never got answered. Where did Tyler go? Malibu in 1986 was a place caught between two worlds. On one side it was the California dream, sun-soaked beaches, mansions perched on cliffs, movie stars and musicians hiding behind gates. On the other side, it was a tight-knit surf community. Local kids who grew up in the water, families who'd lived there for generations, people who knew each other's names. Tyler Brennan belonged to the second world. His family wasn't wealthy. His father worked construction. His mother cleaned houses. They lived in a small bungalow a few blocks from the beach. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. And it was close to the water. That's all Tyler cared about. He'd been surfing since he was 6. His father taught him. Took him out on a longboard and showed him how to read the waves, how to paddle, how to stand, how to respect the ocean. Tyler took to it like he'd been born in the water. By the time he was 12, he was better than most adults. By 16, he was sponsored by a local surf shop. Nothing big, just freeboards and wax. But it was enough, it meant something. He wasn't interested in school. He graduated barely in June of 1986. His teachers said he was smart but distracted. His mind was always somewhere else, out in the water, chasing the next swell. He had no plans for college, no interest in a 9-to-5 job. He wanted to surf, that's all. Just surf. His friends described him as easygoing, quiet. The kind of guy who didn't need to talk much. He let his surfing do the talking. He was good, really good. Some people thought he could go pro, compete, travel the world. But Tyler didn't care about that. He didn't want fame. He just wanted the ocean. The day before he disappeared, Tyler spent the afternoon at the beach with his girlfriend, Amy. She was 17, blonde, pretty. They'd been together for about a year. She wasn't a surfer, but she loved watching him. She'd sit on the sand with a book and glance up every few minutes to see him carve across a wave. That Wednesday, they stayed until sunset. They walked along the shore, holding hands, talking about nothing important. She asked him what he wanted to do with his life. He shrugged, said he didn't know. Maybe travel, maybe just stay in Malibu. As long as he could surf, he didn't care. She kissed him goodbye around 8. He walked her to her car. Told her he'd see her tomorrow. She drove away. That was the last time she saw him. Years later, in an interview, Amy said she'd replayed that night 1,000 times, searching for something, a sign, a clue, anything that might explain what happened. But there was nothing. Just a normal evening, a normal goodbye, and then he was gone. The ocean doesn't care about plans. It doesn't care about tomorrow. It takes what it wants, when it wants. And sometimes it doesn't give it back. Tyler Brennan paddled out on the morning of August 14, 1986, and became part of the mystery that Malibu couldn't solve. His face appeared on missing person posters for years. His story was told and retold, each version a little different. Some said he'd run away, started a new life somewhere else. Others said he'd been murdered, buried in the hills, or dumped at sea. But the truth, as it often does, lay hidden, waiting, patient, like the ocean itself. And 38 years later, it would finally come to light. Tyler James Brennan was born on March 3, 1968 in Santa Monica. His parents, Robert and Linda Brennan, moved to Malibu when he was 3. They wanted space, fresh air, a place where their kids could grow up outside, not trapped in apartments with barred windows. Robert worked construction, long hours, hard labor, sunburned skin and calloused hands. He was a quiet man, didn't talk much, but he loved his sons. He taught them how to fix things, how to use tools, how to respect the ocean. He'd take them fishing on weekends. They'd sit on the pier for hours, not catching much, just being together. Linda worked as a housekeeper for some of the wealthier families in Malibu. She cleaned their mansions, scrubbed their floors, washed their dishes. She didn't complain. She was grateful for the work. It paid the bills. It kept the family afloat. She was warm, kind, the type of mother who always had cookies in the oven and Band-Aids in her purse. Tyler had one younger brother, Danny. He was 14 in 1986. He idolized Tyler, followed him everywhere, wanted to surf like him, dress like him, be like him. Tyler was patient with him. He'd take Danny out on the longboard, show him how to paddle, how to pop up, how to stay balanced. Danny wasn't as good as Tyler. No one was. But he tried. The Brennan house was small, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen with a leaky faucet, a living room with a couch that sagged in the middle, but it was home. The walls were covered with family photos. The fridge was covered with Danny's drawings. The back porch was covered with wetsuits and surfboards. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Malibu in the mid-80s was a strange mix. On one side, you had the mansions, the celebrities, the private beaches, the parties that lasted until dawn. On the other side, you had the locals, the surfers, the fishermen, the families who'd been there long before the movie stars showed up. Tyler existed in the second world. He didn't care about the mansions. He didn't care about the parties. He cared about the waves. He cared about the ocean. That was his world. That was where he belonged. He had a small group of friends, other surfers, local kids. They'd meet at the beach before school, paddle out together, catch a few waves, then head to class still dripping wet, smelling like salt and wax. Teachers didn't like it, but they didn't say much. That's just how it was in Malibu. Surfing came first. Tyler's best friend was a guy named Marcus, same age, same build. Same obsession with the ocean. They'd known each other since elementary school. They surfed together almost every day. Marcus was there the morning Tyler disappeared. He was one of the last people to see him. Marcus never forgave himself. He said he should have stayed out longer, should have kept an eye on Tyler, should have noticed something was wrong, but he didn't. He paddled in, went to work, and Tyler stayed out, alone. Tyler worked part-time at a surf shop on Pacific Coast Highway, a place called Riptide. It was small, cluttered, smelled like fiberglass and resin. The owner, a guy named Frank, had known Tyler since he was a kid. He gave him the job when Tyler turned 16. Mostly, Tyler just hung around, waxed boards, talked to customers, gave advice on which board to buy, which beach had the best waves. Frank said Tyler was a natural. He had a way with people. He wasn't pushy. He didn't try to sell you something you didn't need. He just talked. Shared his love for surfing. And people trusted him. They bought boards because Tyler recommended them. They came back because Tyler made them feel welcome. Frank was devastated when Tyler disappeared. He kept Tyler's paycheck for months, hoping he'd come back, hoping it was all a mistake. But Tyler never came back, and eventually Frank had to accept it. He put a photo of Tyler on the wall behind the register. It's still there. Faded now, but still there. Amy Rodriguez met Tyler at a beach bonfire in the summer of 1985. She was 16. He was 17. She noticed him right away, the way he moved, the way he laughed, the way he seemed completely at ease, like he belonged there more than anyone else. They started dating a few weeks later. It wasn't serious at first, just hanging out, going to the beach, watching sunsets. But it grew into something real, something steady. Amy's parents liked Tyler. He was polite, respectful. He didn't drink. Didn't do drugs, he just surfed. Amy wasn't a surfer. She tried once. Tyler took her out. She fell off the board about 100 times. She laughed so hard she swallowed seawater. Tyler was patient. He didn't push her. He said surfing wasn't for everyone, and that was okay. She could just watch. She was good at that. They spent almost every day together that summer. They'd meet at the beach in the afternoon. Tyler would surf. Amy would read. They'd walk along the shore at sunset, talk about the future, about dreams, about nothing at all. Amy said Tyler was different from other guys. He didn't try to impress her. He didn't brag. He didn't play games. He was just himself. And that was enough. The night before he disappeared, they talked about going to a concert. Some band was playing in Santa Monica the following weekend. Tyler said he'd get tickets. Amy said she'd drive. They made plans. Normal plans. The kind you make when you think you have all the time in the world. But they didn't. The morning of August 14th started like any other. Tyler woke up early. He grabbed his board. He walked down to the beach. The sun was just starting to rise. The sky was pink and orange. The water was calm. Perfect conditions. Marcus was already out, so was another local, a guy named Jeff. They greeted Tyler with nods, no words, just the silent acknowledgement that surfers share. They paddled out together, sat on their boards, waited for the sets to roll in. The waves were good that morning, not huge but clean, consistent, the kind of waves that make you feel alive. Tyler caught a few. Long, smooth rides. He made it look easy. Marcus watched him. He said later that Tyler seemed happy, relaxed, normal. Around 7:30, Marcus paddled in. He had to get to work. He was a busboy at a restaurant in town. He needed the money. He waved to Tyler. Tyler waved back. Marcus walked up the beach, got in his car, drove away. Jeff stayed out a little longer. He caught a few more waves, then he paddled in around 8. He saw Tyler still out there, sitting on his board, staring at the horizon. Jeff didn't think anything of it. Tyler always stayed out longer than everyone else. That was just who he was. Jeff walked to his truck, grabbed a towel, dried off. He glanced back at the water one more time. Tyler was still there, a small figure on a yellow board. Alone in the vastness of the Pacific. That was the last time anyone saw Tyler Brennan alive. By noon, Danny was worried. Tyler had said he'd be back by then. They were supposed to help their dad with something. Fix the fence in the backyard. Tyler had promised, and Tyler always kept his promises. Danny walked down to the beach. He scanned the water. No one was out. The wind had picked up. The waves were choppy. He asked a lifeguard if he'd seen Tyler. The lifeguard said no. Not since early morning. Danny walked back home. He told his mom. She wasn't worried yet. She said Tyler probably lost track of time. He did that sometimes. Got caught up in the waves. Forgot about everything else. She said he'd be home soon. But 1 o'clock came. Then 2, then 3. And Tyler still wasn't home. Linda called the surf shop. Frank said Tyler wasn't scheduled to work that day. He hadn't seen him. Linda called Marcus. Marcus said he'd seen Tyler that morning. Out in the water. But that was hours ago. He didn't know where Tyler was now. By 4 in the afternoon, Linda called the police. She told them her son was missing. He'd gone surfing that morning and never came back. The dispatcher asked how old he was. Linda said 18. The dispatcher said he was an adult. Maybe he just went somewhere. Didn't tell anyone. Linda said no. Tyler wouldn't do that. Something was wrong. The dispatcher said they'd send someone out. An officer arrived around 5. He took a report, asked questions. What was Tyler wearing? What did his surfboard look like? Did he have any enemies? Any reason to run away? Linda answered everything. Her voice was shaking. Her hands were trembling. The officer said they'd look into it. He said not to worry. Most missing persons turn up within 24 hours, but Tyler didn't. By evening, Robert organized a search party. He called everyone he knew, friends, neighbors, other surfers. They met at the beach just before sunset. About 30 people showed up. They spread out along the coastline. They walked for miles, calling Tyler's name, shining flashlights into the water, searching the rocks, the caves, the tide pools. They found nothing. The lifeguard station sent out a patrol boat. They searched the water. They used spotlights. They scanned the surface. They found nothing. The Coast Guard was notified. They said they'd send a helicopter at first light. Linda stayed home. She sat by the phone, waiting, hoping, praying. Danny sat with her. He didn't say anything. He just held her hand. Robert came back around midnight. He was exhausted. His face was pale. His eyes were hollow. He said they'd keep looking. They wouldn't stop until they found Tyler. But deep down, he was starting to fear the worst. The next morning, Friday, August 15th, the search intensified. The Coast Guard helicopter arrived at dawn. It circled the coastline, scanning the water, the beaches, the cliffs. Volunteers returned, more people joined. The local news ran a story. Tyler's photo appeared on TV, a smiling, sun-bleached kid holding a surfboard. The caption read, "Missing surfer, last seen Thursday morning. Amy showed up at the beach around 8. She was crying. She asked Marcus what happened. He told her everything he knew, which wasn't much. Tyler had been out in the water. Then he wasn't. That was it. Amy sat on the sand. She stared at the ocean. She couldn't believe it. She'd just seen him, just talked to him. He was supposed to get concert tickets. They were supposed to go together. Now he was gone. At 10:30 that morning, a fisherman named Carl Donovan was out on his boat about 2 miles south of Zuma Beach. He saw something floating in the water. At first, he thought it was debris, trash, maybe a piece of driftwood. But as he got closer, he realized what it was. A surfboard, yellow with blue stripes. Carl pulled it onto his boat. He saw the leash. It was torn, not cut, torn. The fibers were frayed, twisted, like something had ripped it apart with force. There was no blood, no damage to the board itself, just that torn leash. Carl radioed the Coast Guard. He gave them his coordinates. They told him to bring the board in. He did. He docked at the marina around noon. Police were waiting. They took the board. They examined it. They confirmed it was Tyler's. His name was written on the bottom in black marker. Tyler Brennan, Malibu. The news spread fast. Tyler's board had been found, but Tyler hadn't. The ocean had given back one piece of him, but not the rest. The discovery of the board changed everything. It meant Tyler had been in the water. It meant something had happened. The torn leash suggested force, struggle. But what kind? A rip current? A shark? Something else? Marine biologists were brought in. They examined the leash. They said the tearing pattern was consistent with extreme tension, like the leash had been pulled with incredible force, but they couldn't say what caused it. Shark attacks usually left teeth marks. Bite marks there were none. Rip currents could pull someone under, but they wouldn't tear a leash like that. It didn't make sense. Divers were sent down. They searched the ocean floor near where the board was found. They found nothing. No body, no clothing, no evidence. The water was deep there, dark, cold. Visibility was poor. They searched for 3 days. Then the search was called off. The Coast Guard said there was nothing more they could do. Tyler Brennan was officially listed as missing, presumed drowned, but without a body there was no closure, no funeral, no grave. Just an empty space where a person used to be. The theory started almost immediately. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone had an explanation. Some made sense. Others didn't. But in the absence of facts, speculation filled the void. The most common theory was drowning. Tyler had been caught in a rip current, pulled out to sea. He'd panicked, struggled. The leash had torn. He'd gone under. It was tragic. But it happened. The ocean was dangerous. Even experienced surfers drowned, but others weren't convinced. They pointed to the torn leash. They said rip currents don't do that. They said something else had happened, something violent. The shark theory gained traction. Great whites were known to frequent the California coast. Attacks were rare. But they happened. Maybe Tyler had been attacked. Maybe the shark had pulled him under, torn the leash, dragged him away. But there was no blood, no bite marks on the board. Sharks usually left evidence. This one hadn't. Then there were the darker theories, the ones whispered in bars and parking lots, the ones that suggested foul play. Maybe Tyler had seen something he shouldn't have. Maybe he'd been involved in something. Drugs, money. Malibu had its secrets. Maybe Tyler had stumbled into one. Maybe someone had made sure he didn't talk. But there was no evidence, no motive, no suspects, just rumors. And rumors don't solve cases. The Brennan family refused to give up. They hired a private investigator, a man named Raymond Cole. He was expensive. But they didn't care. They sold their car, took out a loan. They'd do anything to find their son. Cole spent weeks interviewing people. He talked to everyone who'd been at the beach that day. He reviewed the police reports. He studied the tides, the currents, the weather. He came up with nothing. He told the Brennans he was sorry. He said he'd done everything he could. But there were no leads, no evidence, no answers. Robert paid him anyway. He thanked him. Then he went home and sat in Tyler's room. He stared at the surfboard leash hanging on the wall, the torn one, the only piece of Tyler they had left. Linda stopped cleaning houses. She couldn't focus. She'd start crying in the middle of scrubbing a floor. Her clients were understanding, but eventually they stopped calling. She stayed home. She kept Tyler's room exactly as he'd left it, his clothes in the closet, his magazines on the floor, his bed unmade. She said she wanted it ready for when he came back, but he never did. Months passed, then a year, then 2. The case went cold. The police moved on to other investigations. The media stopped covering it. Tyler's face disappeared from the news. His missing person posters faded in the sun, tore in the wind. Eventually they were taken down, but the people who loved him never forgot. Marcus still thought about him every time he paddled out. Amy still cried on August 14th every year. Danny still kept a photo of Tyler in his wallet. And Robert and Linda still waited, still hoped, still believed that one day they'd get answers. The ocean had taken their son, and it wasn't giving him back. Not yet. The Malibu Sheriff's Department assigned Detective Laura Vance to the case. She was 34, experienced, thorough. She'd worked missing persons before. She knew the statistics. She knew that after 48 hours, the chances of finding someone alive dropped dramatically. After a week, they dropped even further. But she also knew that families needed answers, even if those answers were painful. So she worked the case hard. She interviewed everyone. She followed every lead. She did everything by the book. She started with the surfers, Marcus and Jeff. They were the last people to see Tyler. She asked them to walk her through that morning. Step by step. What time did they arrive? What time did Tyler arrive? How long did they surf together? When did they leave? Did Tyler seem upset, distracted, different in any way? Both said no. Tyler seemed normal, happy. He caught some good waves. He smiled. He waved. There was nothing unusual, nothing that suggested something was wrong. Vance asked about the water conditions, the waves, the currents. Marcus said the waves were clean, not too big, not too small. Perfect for a morning session. Jeff said the same. He said the water was calm, no strong currents, no riptides, nothing dangerous. Vance asked if they'd seen anyone else, any boats, any swimmers, any strangers. Both said no. It was just the 3 of them. And then it was just Tyler. Vance interviewed the lifeguards. There were 2 on duty that morning, one at Zuma Beach, one at Point Dume. Both said they'd seen Tyler. They recognized him. He was a regular. They said he paddled out around 6. They didn't see him come in. They assumed he'd left while they were dealing with something else, a lost kid, a jellyfish sting, something routine. Vance asked if they'd noticed anything unusual, any boats in the area, any unusual activity. Both said no. It was a quiet morning, typical, normal. Vance reviewed the Coast Guard reports. They'd searched a 20-mile radius. They'd used helicopters, boats, divers. They'd found nothing except the surfboard. She studied the location where it was found. 2 miles south of where Tyler had gone in. She consulted with marine experts. They said the currents could have carried the board that far, maybe farther, but they couldn't explain the torn leash. She sent the leash to a lab. They analyzed the fibers. They confirmed what the marine biologist had said. The leash had been subjected to extreme tension. It had been pulled with significant force, but they couldn't determine what had caused it. There were no animal fibers, no teeth marks, no chemical residue, just torn nylon. Vance looked into Tyler's personal life. She interviewed his family, his friends, his girlfriend. She asked about his mental state. Was he depressed? Anxious? Suicidal? Everyone said no. Tyler was happy. He loved his life. He loved surfing. He had no reason to hurt himself, no reason to run away. She asked about enemies. Had Tyler fought with anyone, owed anyone money, been involved in anything illegal? Again, everyone said no. Tyler was a good kid. He didn't drink, didn't do drugs, didn't get into trouble. He just surfed. Vance checked Tyler's bank account. He had $237. He hadn't withdrawn any money in the days before he disappeared. She checked his room. His clothes were there. His wallet was there. His ID, his cash, everything was there. If he'd run away, he'd left with nothing. She interviewed Amy. Amy was devastated. She cried through the entire interview. She said Tyler had been fine. They'd made plans. They were going to a concert. He was excited. He'd kissed her goodbye, told her he'd see her tomorrow. There was nothing wrong. Nothing unusual. Vance believed her. She believed all of them. Tyler hadn't run away. He hadn't killed himself. Something had happened to him in the water. But what? Vance explored the shark theory. She contacted marine biologists. She reviewed shark attack data for the California coast. Great whites were common. Attacks were rare, but they happened, usually in the fall, usually in deeper water, usually targeting seals, but sometimes they mistook surfers for prey. She asked if a shark could have attacked Tyler without leaving evidence on the board. The biologists said it was possible, but unlikely. Sharks usually bit the board, left teeth marks, scratches, something. The fact that Tyler's board was undamaged suggested the shark hadn't attacked the board. It had attacked Tyler directly. But if that was the case, where was the body? Sharks didn't usually consume entire bodies. They bit. They released. They swam away. Bodies floated. They washed ashore. Tyler's body never did. Vance contacted the Coast Guard again. She asked if they'd searched the coastline thoroughly. They said yes. They'd walked every beach within a 50-mile radius. They'd checked the rocks, the caves, the tide pools. They'd found nothing. She asked if the body could have been carried out to sea. They said yes. It was possible. Currents could carry a body far from shore. It could sink, get caught in kelp, be consumed by marine life. It happened. Bodies disappeared in the ocean all the time, but it didn't feel right. Vance had a gut feeling. Something was missing, some piece of the puzzle she hadn't found yet. She looked into the foul play theory. She asked around, did Tyler have any enemies? Anyone who might want to hurt him? She talked to people at the surf shop, at the beach, at his high school. Everyone said the same thing. Tyler was liked. He was friendly. He didn't have enemies. She checked for any criminal activity in the area around the time of his disappearance. There had been a few burglaries, some vandalism, nothing violent, nothing that connected to Tyler. She looked into drug activity. Malibu in the 80s had a drug problem. Cocaine was everywhere, parties, beaches, mansions. She asked if Tyler had been involved. Everyone said no. Tyler didn't do drugs. He didn't even drink. He was clean. She checked for any unsolved crimes. Any bodies that had turned up. Any suspicious activity. She found nothing. No connections, no leads. She was hitting dead ends everywhere she turned. 3 months into the investigation, Vance had to admit defeat. She'd done everything she could. She'd followed every lead, interviewed every witness, explored every theory, but she had nothing. No body, no evidence, no answers. She met with the Brennan family. She told them she was sorry. She said the case would remain open. If any new information came to light, she'd follow up. But for now, there was nothing more she could do. Linda cried. Robert stared at the floor. Danny didn't say anything. He just sat there, numb, empty. Vance left the house feeling like she'd failed. She'd worked dozens of cases. She'd solved most of them. But this one had beaten her. The ocean had swallowed Tyler Brennan, and it wasn't giving him back. The case file was moved to the cold case division. It sat in a box on a shelf, gathering dust, waiting. Years passed. Detectives came and went. The file was reviewed occasionally, but no new leads emerged, no new evidence, no breakthroughs. Tyler Brennan became a statistic, one of thousands of people who disappeared every year, one of hundreds who vanished in the ocean, one of many whose families never got closure. But the ocean remembers, even when people forget. It holds on to its secrets. It keeps them safe, hidden in the dark, in the cold, in the silence. And sometimes after decades, it lets them go. Time is cruel. It doesn't stop. It doesn't wait. It moves forward, indifferent to grief. Days become weeks. Weeks become months. Months become years. And slowly, painfully, life goes on. For the Brennan family, life after Tyler was a shadow of what it had been. The house felt empty. The silence was unbearable. Every morning, Linda woke up and forgot, just for a moment, that Tyler was gone. Then she remembered, and the pain hit her all over again. Robert threw himself into work. He took extra shifts, stayed late, came home exhausted. He didn't talk about Tyler. He couldn't. The words wouldn't come. He kept everything inside, locked away, hidden. Danny struggled the most. He was 14 when Tyler disappeared, 15 when the search was called off, 16 when he realized his brother was never coming home. He stopped surfing. He couldn't do it. Every time he looked at the ocean, he saw Tyler, sitting on his board, waiting for the next wave, alone. He started getting into trouble. Skipping school, drinking, fighting. His parents didn't know what to do. They were drowning in their own grief. They didn't have the energy to save him too. By the time Danny was 18, he'd dropped out of school. He was working odd jobs, living paycheck to paycheck. He moved out of the house, couldn't stand being there anymore. Too many memories, too many ghosts. Amy left Malibu in 1988. She couldn't stay. Everywhere she looked, she saw Tyler, the beach, the pier, the surf shop. She went to college in Northern California. She tried to move on. She dated other guys, but none of them were Tyler. None of them understood. She graduated, got a job, got married, had kids, built a life, but she never forgot. Every year on August 14th, she thought about him, wondered what had happened, wondered if he'd suffered, wondered if he'd thought about her in those final moments. She kept a photo of him in a drawer. She didn't look at it often. But she knew it was there, a reminder of the boy she'd loved, the boy the ocean had taken. Marcus stayed in Malibu. He kept surfing, but it was different now. Every time he paddled out, he thought about that morning, the last time he'd seen Tyler. He replayed it in his mind, over and over, searching for something he'd missed, some sign, some warning. He never found it. He got married in 1992, had 2 kids, opened his own surf shop. He put a photo of Tyler on the wall, right next to the register, just like Frank had done. He told his kids about Tyler, about how good he was, about how the ocean had taken him. He said it was important to remember, important to honor him, even if they never found out what happened. The years passed. The 80s became the 90s. The 90s became the 2000s. Technology advanced. The world changed. But the mystery of Tyler Brennan remained unsolved. Occasionally someone would bring it up. A journalist writing a story about unsolved disappearances, a true crime podcast looking for content, a documentary filmmaker searching for a compelling case. They'd interview the family, review the evidence, speculate about what happened. But nothing ever came of it. No new leads, no breakthroughs, just the same old questions, the same old theories, the same old pain. Linda died in 2003. Heart attack. She was 62. The doctors said it was sudden, but Robert knew better. She'd been dying for years, ever since Tyler disappeared. Her heart had been broken. It just took 17 years to stop beating. Robert followed her in 2009. Cancer. He fought it for a while, but he was tired. He'd been tired for a long time. He was ready to go, ready to see Linda again. And maybe, if there was an afterlife, ready to see Tyler. Danny was alone now. Both parents gone. His brother gone. He was 43 years old. He'd spent more of his life without Tyler than with him. But the loss never faded. It never got easier. He visited Tyler's grave sometimes, except there was no grave, just a memorial plaque at the beach, a small bronze square embedded in the sand. It read, Tyler James Brennan, 1968-1986. Forever in the waves. Danny would sit there, stare at the ocean, and wonder. The case file sat in storage, untouched, forgotten. The detectives who'd worked it had retired, moved on, died. New detectives came in. They had their own cases, their own mysteries. Tyler Brennan was just a name in a file, a cold case from decades ago, one of many. But in 2019, something changed. The Malibu Sheriff's Department received a grant, funding for a cold case unit. They hired new detectives, gave them resources, told them to review old cases, see if modern technology could solve what old methods couldn't. One of those detectives was a woman named Sarah Chen. She was 31, sharp, driven. She'd grown up in Los Angeles. She'd heard about Tyler Brennan, the surfer who disappeared. The case that was never solved. She requested the file. She read through it, every page, every report, every interview. She studied the photos, the evidence, the theories. And she saw what Detective Vance had seen 33 years earlier. Something didn't add up. Something was missing. She decided to reopen the case. Sarah Chen didn't believe in ghosts, but she believed in answers. She believed that every mystery had a solution, every question had an answer. You just had to look hard enough, ask the right questions, use the right tools. And in 2019, the tools were better than they'd ever been. She started by reviewing the physical evidence, the surfboard, the torn leash. They'd been in storage for 33 years, sitting in a box in a warehouse. She had them brought to the lab. She wanted them re-examined. Modern forensic techniques were far more advanced than they'd been in 1986. Maybe they'd find something the original investigators had missed. The lab technicians went over every inch of the board. They used UV light, chemical analysis, microscopic examination. They found traces of salt, sand, wax, all expected. But they also found something else, something small, something that had been overlooked. Fibers, synthetic fibers, embedded in the wax near the tail of the board. They were blue, nylon. Consistent with rope, but not the leash. The leash was black. These fibers were blue. Chen asked the lab to analyze them. They did. They determined the fibers were from a marine-grade rope, the kind used on boats. Fishing boats, yachts, the kind that could withstand salt water. Tension, wear. Chen's mind started racing. A rope on Tyler's board. Why would there be rope fibers on his board? She went back to the original reports. She reviewed the witness statements, the surfers, the lifeguards, the fishermen who'd found the board. She looked for any mention of boats, any mention of rope. She found nothing. She decided to re-interview the witnesses, or at least the ones who were still alive. Marcus was still in Malibu. She tracked him down. He was 53 now, graying, weathered, but still surfing, still running his shop. She asked him about that morning. He told her the same story he'd told Detective Vance 33 years earlier. He'd surfed with Tyler. He'd paddled in. Tyler had stayed out. That was it. Chen asked if he'd seen any boats. Marcus thought for a moment. Then he said yes. There had been a boat, a fishing boat. It had been out there, not close, but visible. He hadn't thought anything of it. Fishing boats were common. They were always out there. Chen asked if he remembered what the boat looked like. Marcus shook his head. It was 33 years ago. He barely remembered what he'd had for breakfast that morning, let alone what a random boat looked like. But it was something. A lead. Small, but real. Chen went back to the Coast Guard records. She requested logs from August 14, 1986. She wanted to know what boats had been in the area that morning. The Coast Guard sent her the files. She went through them, page by page. There were dozens of boats. Fishing boats, pleasure boats, yachts. Sailboats, all registered, all accounted for. She cross-referenced them with the location where Tyler's board had been found. She narrowed it down to 6 boats that had been in the vicinity. She started tracking them down. 3 had been sold. Owners unknown. 1 had been scrapped. 1 had sunk in a storm in 1994, but 1 was still around, still registered, still in use. A fishing boat called the Sea Drift, owned by a man named Vincent Caruso. Chen ran a background check. Caruso was 71. He'd been a commercial fisherman for 50 years. He'd worked the California coast his entire life. He had a clean record, no arrests, no complaints, nothing suspicious, but Chen wanted to talk to him anyway. She found him at the marina. He was working on his boat, mending nets. His hands were gnarled. His face was leathered by the sun. He looked up when Chen approached. She introduced herself, showed him her badge, asked if he had a few minutes to talk. Caruso nodded. He invited her onto the boat. They sat in the cabin. Chen asked him if he remembered August 14, 1986. Caruso laughed. He said he barely remembered last week, let alone 33 years ago. Chen showed him a photo of Tyler. Asked if he recognized him. Caruso studied the photo. He shook his head, said he didn't. Chen asked if he'd been fishing that morning. Caruso said probably. He fished every morning back then. It was his job, his life. Chen asked if he'd seen anything unusual. Any surfers in distress, any accidents? Caruso said no. He said if he'd seen something, he would have helped. He would have called it in. He wasn't the kind of guy who ignored someone in trouble. Chen believed him, but she pressed further. She asked if anyone else had been on the boat with him that day. Caruso thought for a moment. Then he said yes. His nephew. A kid named Tony. He'd been helping out that summer, learning the trade. Chen asked where Tony was now. Caruso said he didn't know. They'd had a falling out years ago. Tony had gotten into some trouble, drugs, theft. Caruso had cut him off, hadn't spoken to him in over a decade. Chen asked for Tony's full name. Caruso gave it to her. Anthony Caruso. Chen thanked him. She left the boat. She had a new lead. She ran a background check on Anthony Caruso. What she found made her stomach turn. Tony had a record, a long one. Drug possession, assault, theft. He'd been in and out of prison for years. He was currently serving time in Corcoran State Prison. Aggravated assault. He had 3 years left on his sentence. Chen requested a visit. She drove to the prison. She sat across from Tony in a small grey room. He was 51, thin, hollow-eyed. He looked like life had chewed him up and spit him out. Chen told him why she was there. She said she was investigating the disappearance of Tyler Brennan. She said she knew Tony had been on the sea drift that morning. She asked if he remembered anything. Tony stared at her. His jaw tightened. He didn't say anything. Chen pressed. She said she knew about the rope fibers. She said she knew something had happened. She said if Tony told her the truth, it might help him, might reduce his sentence, might give him a chance at redemption. Tony looked away. He was silent for a long time. Then, finally, he spoke. He said it was an accident. Tony told Chen everything. He said he'd been out on the boat with his uncle that morning. They'd been fishing, setting nets. He'd been high. He'd been using cocaine. His uncle didn't know. Tony had been hiding it. Sneaking hits when his uncle wasn't looking. He said they'd seen a surfer, a kid on a yellow board. He was out there alone, just sitting, waiting for waves. Tony said his uncle had told him to steer clear, give the kid space. But Tony wasn't paying attention. He was high, distracted. He said he'd been pulling in a net. It had gotten tangled. He'd been trying to free it. He'd been pulling hard. The boat had drifted, closer to the surfer, too close. Tony said the net had caught something. He'd felt resistance. He'd pulled harder. Then he'd heard a shout. He'd looked up. The surfer was in the water. The net was wrapped around him. He was struggling, panicking. Tony said he'd tried to help. He'd tried to pull the net back, but it was too late. The surfer went under. The net pulled him down. Tony said he'd jumped in, tried to find him, but the water was dark. The net was heavy. He couldn't see anything. He said he'd surfaced, gasping. Terrified. His uncle had pulled him back onto the boat. They'd searched, they'd circled the area, but they couldn't find the surfer. He was gone. Tony said his uncle had panicked. He'd said they couldn't report it. They'd lose their license. Their livelihood. Tony would go to jail. They'd be ruined. So they'd left. They'd pulled up the net, cut it free, and they'd left. Tony said he'd been haunted by it ever since. He said he saw the surfer's face in his dreams, heard his shout, felt the weight of the guilt. He said he'd tried to forget, tried to bury it, but it never went away. He said he was sorry. He said he knew it didn't change anything, but he was sorry. Chen left the prison. She felt sick, angry, sad. Tyler Brennan hadn't drowned. He hadn't been attacked by a shark. He'd been killed by negligence, by a high kid who wasn't paying attention, by a man who'd chosen to cover it up rather than face the consequences. She contacted the district attorney. She presented the evidence, the rope fibers, Tony's confession. The DA said they'd prosecute. Tony would face additional charges, manslaughter, obstruction of justice. He'd spend the rest of his life in prison. Vincent Caruso was also charged. Accessory after the fact. He pleaded guilty. He said he'd made a terrible mistake. He said he'd been scared. He said he was sorry. He was sentenced to 5 years. The case was closed. After 38 years, The mystery of Tyler Brennan was solved. The news broke on a cold morning in November 2024. 38 years after Tyler Brennan disappeared, the truth finally surfaced. Local news stations ran the story. National outlets picked it up. The headlines were stark, simple, devastating. Malibu cold case solved. Surfer's death was accident cover-up. 38 years later, family gets answers in 1986 disappearance. Fisherman confesses to role in surfer's death. Danny Brennan was 52 years old when Detective Chen called him. She asked if he could come to the station. She said she had news, important news. Danny's heart sank. He'd gotten calls like this before. False leads, dead ends, disappointments. But this time was different. Chen sat him down. She told him everything. The rope fibers, the re-interview with Marcus, the fishing boat, Tony Caruso's confession. She told him how Tyler had died, tangled in a net, pulled under, drowned. She told him about the cover-up, the decades of silence, the guilt that had eaten Tony alive. Danny didn't say anything at first. He just sat there, staring at the floor, processing. After 38 years of not knowing, he finally had answers. But the answers didn't feel like relief. They felt like a new kind of pain. He asked where Tyler's body was. Chen said they didn't know. The ocean was vast, deep. After 38 years, there was nothing left to recover. Tyler was gone, but at least now they knew why. Danny nodded. He thanked Chen. He walked out of the station. He got in his car and he drove to the beach. He stood at the memorial plaque, the bronze square embedded in the sand. Tyler's name, the dates, the inscription. He'd stood here hundreds of times. But this time felt different. This time he had closure. He thought about his brother, about the kid who'd loved the ocean more than anything, who'd woken up before dawn to chase waves, who'd smiled with his whole face, who'd been kind, patient. Good? He thought about the life Tyler never got to live, the places he never got to see, the waves he never got to ride, the family he never got to have, all of it stolen, not by the ocean, but by carelessness, by fear. By a man who'd chosen to save himself instead of doing the right thing. Danny felt anger, deep, burning anger, but he also felt something else, something unexpected, sadness, not just for Tyler, but for Tony Caruso. For a man who'd spent 38 years carrying the weight of what he'd done, who'd destroyed his own life trying to hide from the truth. There were no winners here, just loss, just waste, just the cruel indifference of time. The trial was brief. Tony Caruso pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter and obstruction of justice. He was sentenced to 25 years. Added to his existing sentence, it meant he'd die in prison. He was 51. He'd never see freedom again. Vincent Caruso, now 71, pleaded guilty to accessory after the fact. He was sentenced to 5 years. His lawyer argued for leniency, cited his age, his clean record, his remorse. The judge was unmoved. He said Vincent had made a choice. He'd chosen to protect himself instead of giving a family closure. He'd chosen silence over truth, and that choice had consequences. Vincent was led away in handcuffs. He looked small, frail, broken. His fishing days were over. His reputation was destroyed. His family had disowned him. He had nothing left. At the sentencing, Danny was given the opportunity to speak. He stood at the podium. He looked at Tony, at Vincent. He thought about what he wanted to say. He'd imagined this moment for years, imagined confronting the person responsible for Tyler's death, imagined screaming, cursing, demanding justice. But now that he was here, the words wouldn't come. What was there to say? Tyler was gone. Nothing would bring him back. No sentence, no apology, no amount of suffering could undo what had been done. So Danny said the only thing that felt true. He said he forgave them, not because they deserved it, but because he needed to. Because carrying hate for 38 years had nearly destroyed him, because his parents had died without answers, and he didn't want to die without peace. He said Tyler would have wanted that. Tyler had been kind. He'd been forgiving. He'd been good, and Danny wanted to honor that. Even now, even after everything. Tony cried. Vincent stared at the floor. The judge nodded, and Danny walked out of the courtroom, lighter than he'd been in decades. The ocean doesn't apologize. It doesn't explain. It doesn't offer closure. It simply is. Vast, indifferent, eternal. It takes what it wants. And sometimes, after decades, it gives back pieces, small fragments of truth, enough to build understanding, enough to find peace. Tyler Brennan's story became part of Malibu's history, a cautionary tale, a reminder of the ocean's power, and the human capacity for both cruelty and redemption. His memorial plaque remained on the beach. But now, people knew the full story. They knew what had happened. They knew why. Marcus visited the plaque often. He'd bring flowers, sit in the sand, talk to Tyler like he was still there. He'd tell him about his kids, his grandkids, his shop. He'd tell him about the waves, about how the ocean had changed, about how surfing had changed, but also about how some things stayed the same. The pull of the water, the feeling of riding a wave, the peace that came from being out there, alone with the sea. Amy came back to Malibu for the first time in decades. She stood at the memorial. She cried, not just for Tyler, but for the girl she'd been, the future they'd imagined, the life they'd never gotten to live. She said goodbye, really goodbye. For the first time in 38 years, and then she left. She didn't need to come back. She had her closure. Danny scattered his parents' ashes at the beach, right where Tyler had paddled out that last morning. He said a prayer. Not a religious one, just words, thoughts, hopes. He said he hoped they were together, wherever they were. He said he hoped Tyler knew he'd never been forgotten, that he'd been loved, that he'd mattered. And then he did something he hadn't done in 38 years. He went surfing. The water was cold, the waves were small. Danny was out of practice. He fell more than he stood. But it didn't matter. He was out there, in the ocean, where Tyler had been, where Tyler had loved to be. And for the first time since 1986, Danny felt close to his brother again. He sat on the board. He looked at the horizon. He felt the rise and fall of the swells beneath him. He thought about Tyler, about the kid who'd lived for this, who'd died doing this, and he understood. He understood why Tyler had loved it so much, the freedom, the simplicity, the connection to something bigger than yourself. The ocean had taken Tyler, but it had also given him everything, every perfect wave, every sunrise, every moment of pure, unfiltered joy. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that was the only closure that mattered. Danny caught a wave, a small one. He stood up, wobbled, stayed on. He rode it all the way to shore, and when he stepped off the board he was smiling, really smiling, for the first time in decades. He looked back at the ocean, at the endless blue, at the place where his brother had disappeared. And he whispered 2 words. Thank you. The case file was officially closed in December 2024. Detective Sarah Chen received a commendation for her work. She'd solved a case that had been cold for nearly 4 decades. She'd given a family answers. She'd brought justice. It was the kind of case that defined a career. But Chen didn't think about accolades. She thought about Tyler, about a kid who'd gone surfing one morning and never came home, about a family that had spent 38 years in limbo, about the fragility of life and the importance of truth. She kept a photo of Tyler on her desk, the same one that had been on the missing person posters. The smiling, sun-bleached kid holding a surfboard. She looked at it sometimes, reminded herself why she did this work, why it mattered, because everyone deserves answers, everyone deserves justice, even if it takes 38 years. Malibu moved on, the way places do. The story faded from the headlines. New stories took its place. New mysteries, new tragedies, new lives. But Tyler's memorial remained, a small bronze plaque on the sand. A reminder that some people never really leave. They become part of the landscape, part of the story, part of the ocean itself. Surfers still paddled out at dawn, still chased waves, still felt the pull of the water. And sometimes on quiet mornings, when the ocean was glassy and the sun was just rising, they'd think about Tyler Brennan, the boy who never came back from the beach, the boy who became a legend. The boy who reminded them that the ocean was beautiful, but it was also dangerous, and it demanded respect. The waves kept rolling in, the tides kept changing, the sun kept rising and setting, and the ocean kept its secrets, most of them. But not all, because sometimes after decades of silence, the truth surfaces, like a piece of driftwood, like a torn leash, like a confession whispered in a prison cell. And when it does, it brings with it a kind of peace, imperfect, painful, but real. Tyler Brennan was 18 years old when he died. He'd been tangled in a fishing net, pulled under, drowned. His body was never recovered, but his story was. And in the end, that was enough. The ocean had taken him. But it had also given him back, in pieces, in fragments, in truth. And now, finally, he could rest. The end epilogue. The weight of water. Years from now, when people tell the story of Tyler Brennan, they'll remember different things. Some will remember the mystery, the decades of not knowing, the theories, the speculation. Others will remember the resolution, the confession, the trial, the justice. But those who knew him will remember something else. They'll remember the way he smiled, the way he moved in the water, the way he made surfing look effortless. They'll remember his kindness, his patience, his love for the ocean. And they'll remember that he died doing what he loved, in the place he loved, surrounded by the thing that gave his life meaning. There's a certain poetry in that, a certain symmetry. The ocean gave Tyler everything, and in the end, it took everything. But it also preserved him, not his body, but his memory, his legacy, his story, because the ocean doesn't forget. It holds on to things, keeps them safe, hidden in the depths, and sometimes, when the time is right, it lets them go. It gives them back, not whole, but enough. Enough to understand, enough to heal, enough to move forward. Tyler Brennan is gone, but he's not forgotten. He lives on in the waves, in the stories, in the hearts of those who loved him. And in the small bronze plaque on the sand that bears his name, Tyler James Brennan, 1968-1986, forever in the waves. The ocean took him, but it never really let him go. And maybe that's the truest kind of immortality there is.